Excellent.
Okay, get closer.
Okay, well,
Maybe higher.
Higher.
Tilted, yes.
I'm not used to using a microphone. So
Great.
there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leeroy Moyo, and this is the story of my family. The story of my being in Maplewood would not be complete without telling the story of a certain man who lived some 200 years ago, if not longer. And I know the story of every single one of us in this room has an origin hundreds of years ago, but I'm telling my story, therefore I'll tell you about this man. His name was Cecil John Rhodes. He decided to leave England, chartered by Her Majesty to expand the British Empire on the African continent. He landed in Southern Africa and loved what he saw. In fact, his doctor in England had told him, "Now listen, CJR, those are his initials. You need to go to warmer weather. You're not doing so good. You just need to leave these British Isles and go somewhere nice and warm." And he ended up in Southern Africa. He landed in South Africa and somehow tracked and made his way up just slightly north of South Africa and ended up in Zimbabwe, where I am from. And I read a book some years ago called Guns, Germs, and Steel, which spoke of the disparity in technologies that existed, not because certain people were smarter than others, but just because of necessity at the time. My people did not see it necessary to have gunpowder and were easily subdued by those that supported Cecil John Rhodes. And for hundreds of years, my country became what's called Rhodesia, what was then called Rhodesia, named after Cecil John Rhodes. We were a colony of the British Empire. A war broke out when folks decided that they needed to be free, have the right of self-determination as a nation. And there were two armies in present-day Zimbabwe. And there was a northern army, a southern army. The southern army was led by a man named Joshua Nkomo, who so happened to be my wife's grandfather. And he led the War of Revolution, so he was a modern day Hamilton, so to speak. And that was the Southern Army. The Northern Army was led by one, Robert Mugabe. Very complicated legacy that he has. And eventually, we attained independence in 1980, a young democracy in the grand scheme of things. Fast forward a few years, no one ever thinks when they're born that, oh yeah, I'm itching to leave this place, We all are born and we think, we're kind of going to move maybe a few neighborhoods away or a few towns away. In fact, I disappointed my mother when I told her I was going to move some 300 miles away to a town called Harare, the capital city. Yet, because our independence was in 1980, we started to move with the times, and the International Monetary Fund instituted what's called the Structural Adjustment Program, or Economic Structural Adjustment Program, to align African economies with the rest of the world, free market economies. And that brought about untold suffering to the people of Zimbabwe as we aligned with free market principles. This was coupled with the British not keeping their promise of addressing the injustice of colonialism, and there was a violent uprising. This was in 1997, and unfortunately, people lost their lives. White farmers lost their lives, and the rest of the world slapped terrible sanctions on Zimbabwe, and those sanctions affected absolutely everyone, and I was not spared. The effect of those sanctions, I was not spared. After graduating from medical school in 2005, my mom had passed away, unfortunately, because of the poor healthcare system in Zimbabwe. I remember the Easter of 2006. We were young professionals, we were skilled, we were going to the operating room, delivering babies by C-section. I was only 24, and I graduated out of medical school at 24. I was doing surgeries. It was fun, it was amazing. But we could not afford a meal. We would have a traditional, it's called pap, it's a corn-based food, and just to give it some form of flavor, sometimes we'd have it with salt. And that would constitute a meal. And we couldn't believe that this was a lot. We were young, some of us were surgeons, OB-GYNs, and we couldn't afford a meal. And I remember I called around, I spoke to some relatives, I spoke to some friends. I had friends who had left Zimbabwe out of necessity. The push factors are typically stronger than the pull factors when you leave the society or the community that you're in. Nothing was attractive about America for me, other than what I saw on television. Not because it was some bad nation or some amazing nation, but I was at home. There was no reason for me to leave my home up until it was impossible for me to live in Zimbabwe. The economy had just tanked. My salary would not be enough. Every single month my salary had to go up. Bread cost millions of dollars. And friends around the world chipped in for me to take an exam and to start trying to get myself licensed in the United States. But I had to leave immediately, and I ended up in a country within a country called Lesotho. And the first thing I saw was a raggedy taxi. And I was like, oh my goodness, where am I? Because Zimbabwe was a very developed nation, ahead of its peers in Southern Africa. And I got to a random country. I took up a job, sight unseen, to go work in the healthcare system. And my heart sank when I arrived there, and it looked bad. I was like, why did I leave home for this? But thankfully I did go there, because had I not, I truly would not be here. Because a few years earlier, my wife, who is first generation Zimbabwean, born in Alabama, traveled to meet her extended family. And we so happened to be neighbors with her extended family. We met in 2003, we lost contact. I then ended up in Lesotho, in this random African country, poorly developed, upset. And then my wife happened to be traveling to South Africa. So Lesotho is a country within a country. It is a country surrounded by South Africa. And my future wife happened to be traveling to South Africa and invited me to meet her in South Africa. I was like, I can't, I'm working, I'm on call. She's like, well, I'll come on over to Lesotho. I was like, yeah, you do that, I might have to go to the hospital. And there was a big party, some friends, in fact, my girlfriend was hosting a birthday party for me, and my wife flew in, and I didn't know there was a party for me, and she was just a friend. And however, it became clear that we both needed to resolve our respective situations, and there was something. And fast forward a few years, through many countries. I went to England, my route of many, many miles on Delta. I ended up in Florida for additional training, because you don't just waltz into America and become a physician, you have to redo everything. And we got married in Florida, but we had to leave Florida after training because, number one, there were no seasons. And number two, my wife is an actress and she wanted to come back to the New York area. We were living in the city, and my wife was pregnant and she was on a TV show. And I would hear lots about this TV show. She was with Bradley Cooper and how dreamy he is. And then she had a terrible complication with the pregnancy while on the show. And I was traveling, working. I was doing locum work in the Midwest. And suddenly she had to drop everything, get off the show, leave the show. Her mom came, picked her up. She had to be on bed rest for about 6 months. And I closed down the apartment, took everything. I was like, where can I store our stuff? I was like, there's a random town in Lil Ferry. Let's put our stuff in Lil Ferry. And we did exactly that. And then we're like, well, our stuff is in New Jersey. You want to be in the city. The city was expensive. We had a Matchbox. Let's look for a place. We were in Montclair. We went to Montclair in an Airbnb. Montclair is pretty famous for those who don't know Jersey that much. If you know a little bit about Jersey, you will know about Montclair. So we're like, yeah, we want to be in Montclair. Our money was like, no, you're not going to be in Montclair. And our realtor was like, I know a gem of a town. It's not too far from Montclair. And I had coffee at the Village coffee shop. I loved it. And I was like, this town's amazing. It was kind of gray like this. I was like, it's beautiful. It reminds me of home, the trees. And I had to travel, and my wife saw a home, and she's like, well, we'll outbid on a few houses, par for the course. But she saw our current home, our home, and she's like, this is it. I was away. I was like, if you love it, put an offer. I don't mind, whatever you like, let's do it. We put an offer. We're very lucky, and you typically move to a neighborhood that's commensurate with your wallet. And then you're lucky for the community that you move into. And we were so lucky for our street, lucky for the broader community that we're a part of. Being Black in Jersey has been an experience. I'm lucky to be in Maplewood, I'm lucky to be in South Orange, but I do see the parallels of the Black experience in America with the Black experience in Southern Africa, in Africa. As your parents were fighting for civil rights, and your grandparents and many, many generations before that, generations before mine were fighting for independence from colonialism. And the story of Black struggle against some form of force has been true no matter where you are geographically around the world. And I'm privileged to be, here and to continue to advocate for my family, for the Black community, and for anyone who wants to be a partner in seeing a better Maplewood, a better Jersey, just a better tomorrow. So this is the story of my family and how I ended up in New Jersey. Thank you.